The night was unusually silent, as if the city itself were holding its breath. I leaned back in the cracked leather chair by the window, the hum of the neon sign from across the street casting a cold, electric blue across my face. He was on the couch, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on me like a predator waiting for the first move. I had laughed, carelessly, a half-drunk bravado spilling from my lips. Honestly, I'd cheat if I could get away with it. It was supposed to be a joke. Flirty, teasing, the kind of thing we'd laugh about over cheap wine and shared fries. But when I looked up, expecting the easy smirk or playful shake of his head, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't even blinking. What? His voice was low, measured, and terrifying in its calm. I tried to recover, tried to bend the words into something lighter, but the moment had snapped like a brittle twig. He didn't sit down again. He didn't even say anything else. He just got up, and I watched him walk to the door, each step heavier than the last. The click of the lock sounded like a hammer striking my chest. Earlier that evening, the signs had been so subtle I ignored them. The extra phone calls, the cryptic texts, the faint smell of perfume, not mine, on his collar. I had laughed them off, my mind narrating a version of reality where nothing could ever touch us. "We're solid," I whispered to myself as I poured another glass of wine, the liquid catching the light and trembling slightly in the glass. But now, seeing him leave, I realized how naive that hope had been. I sat there for a long while, tracing the condensation on my glass with a finger, trying to make sense of a statement I had thought was harmless. How could words, so casual, so reckless, break someone you loved? And more importantly, why did they? The first crack appeared a week earlier. He had cancelled dinner with me for what he claimed was an urgent meeting. I hadn't pressed. I didn't want to be that girlfriend, the one who suffocated. But there was a tension, a subtle withdrawal in his laughter, in the way he moved around our apartment. It had seemed trivial, dismissible, but now it felt like the beginning of a storm I hadn't seen coming. I remembered standing by the fridge, pretending to make a snack while he scrolled his phone, the faint light reflecting off his face. "Who's texting you at this hour?" I had asked, almost joking. He had shrugged. "Just work stuff." And I let it go. I let him go. Hours later, after the slam of the door, I wandered through the apartment, my fingers brushing over the objects we had chosen together. Our couch, the mismatched mugs, the framed photo from our trip to the coast. Everything felt alien. The photo, which had once made me smile, now mocked me with its frozen happiness. My stomach churned, a bitter cocktail of regret and disbelief. I scrolled through my phone, finding the same text message I had ignored before. And this time, I read it differently. There were phrases that made my chest tighten. "Missed you tonight. Can't wait to see you again." The casual intimacy of someone who wasn't me. My own words echoed back to me in cruel irony. I'd cheat if I could get away with it. I spent the night pacing, haunted by the shadows of my own confession. My laughter had been flippant, careless, a dare in words, but somehow it had opened a door I wasn't ready to face. I tried rationalizing it. He overreacted, surely, but each excuse felt weaker than the last. Denial was a thin veil. Guilt and fear bled through. By dawn, I was sitting in the kitchen, hands shaking, staring at 2 coffee cups, one empty, one untouched. The smell of brewed coffee mingled with the faint lingering scent of him, and I realized that betrayal isn't always an act. Sometimes, it's a silence, a departure, a refusal to meet you in the half-light of your own recklessness. A week passed. He hadn't returned my calls. The apartment had become a museum of memories, each one cutting sharper than the last. I found myself replaying every conversation, every look, every fleeting moment that could have been a warning. I realized the worst betrayal wasn't my words, it was my complacency, my inability to notice the growing distance until it became an unbridgeable chasm. Then came the email. Subject line, "We need closure." My heart pounded as I opened it. The message was polite, clinical even, but underneath the restraint, I could feel the pain. He wrote about trust, about boundaries, about how a single careless joke can sometimes reveal cracks you didn't know existed. He admitted he had felt distant for months but had hoped for honesty, not games. And finally, he said he was leaving, not out of anger, but to protect himself. I sat in stunned silence, tears blurring the words. I had loved him. I had truly loved him. And yet, love had not been enough. Not when words, carelessness, and denial had corroded the foundation. Weeks later, I met him briefly at a mutual friend's gathering. He looked older, quieter, but there was a gentleness in his eyes that I had always adored. I wanted to reach for him, to explain, to beg, to laugh and cry all at once. But the words died in my throat. He smiled softly, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and turned away. That night, I realized betrayal wears many masks. Some are blatant, some are subtle, and some, the cruelest, are worn by ourselves. I had laughed, I had dared, and I had lost. The memory of his departure, the silence that followed my careless words, would haunt me for the rest of my life. Love, I learned, isn't just about passion or desire. It's about attention, trust, and the courage to protect the fragile heart of another human being. And sometimes, that lesson comes only after the door has closed, leaving nothing but the echo of what might have been.